Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and those of you who have gone through our courses, Preparing for Success After Prison, know that I'm really passionate about helping people in jail and prison reinvent themselves and rebuild. And I'm really grateful because today I get to introduce you to Bruce, a successful businessman who's gone through kind of the cycles where he's had one successful business and then used that skill to go on and build another. And we're going to learn a little bit about the hospitality business and real estate. And I look forward to sharing that with people in prison. I think that they will find the principles we offer through all of our courses reflective in Bruce's story. That is, if a person develops good verbal communication skills, writing skills, math skills, critical thinking, that person can overcome the challenges that afflict so many people who've gone through the prison system. I call them justice impacted people. I don't call them inmates or convicts or prisoners. They're just people. And we need to figure out a way how to recalibrate and rebuild. And that's why I'm so grateful to you, Bruce, for accepting my call and expressing a willingness to share your inspiring story with others. Why don't you tell us about that rustic background that you got going on behind you?
Well, first, Michael, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And this rustic background right here actually was built by me. And actually, my son helped me collect wood all over the county. There are old barns out here in the middle of nowhere where people are wanting them tore down. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to redo this old building that had trees growing out of it, and I'm going to do it for next to nothing. And she really didn't believe me. It ended up being less than $1,000 because the roof is flat and we had to put rubber on it. But with that being said, we went around, we collected all of this wood, and I happen to have skills outside of business skills where I love carpentry. My grandfather was a carpenter, and I learned a lot when I was young. And so I built this into a cabin specifically to stay in on the property, while the other cabins, which are kind of like Airbnb, fully furnished homes that sit next to a lake, provide the income that we need for sustainability. So it was pretty interesting. It was one of the last things I did out here, but it's absolutely beautiful. I love it.
So that's really what this is all about. When I asked you to share your inspiring story, a lot of the people that are in our audience, and there's several 100,000 people in jails and prisons, don't fully appreciate how challenging it is for them to get back on their feet when they come home. Sometimes employers are not so friendly to them, and I like to share stories about people who found a way to recalibrate and rebuild after a setback. And I know that we can get a lot of that information because you agreed to share our story with us. So I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, but about your history and your background in business. But before we get there, why don't you walk us through the business that you're in right now? You alluded to it a little bit, but tell us about your business model and how how you guys earn a living.
Sure. You made a comment right there that I think I might want to address. And one of those things is that, people coming out of prison need a second chance, but people coming out of businesses that did not succeed, such as my prior business, need a second chance. And, I've been in many businesses, Michael, over the years. Some have been successful, some haven't. It just so happens we stumbled across this one. And because of the wonderful wife that I have, and she she does things really good on one side, I do things really good on the other side, and it works together. So we were actually looking for a small cabin for our family. We blended our family. We have 6 kids together, all wonderful children doing great things in life. And she tells me one day, she says, "Hey, look at this cabin. It's got 10 bedrooms." I said, "Hey, you should probably keep looking at cabins because that's not probably going to work for us." Well, it turns out it was a little hobby that this guy had next to a lake, and this lake happens to be owned by the U.S. government, so there's no homes on the lake, and it's absolutely beautiful. It was designed to back up water via a dam and control the flooding down south. So anyhow, we met with the gentleman. He owned everything free and clear. That's a very important thing to understand if you ever want to get into real estate. You do not have to technically go through banks and lenders to get loans. I mean, if somebody owns something free and clear, and they want to take a chance on you by becoming the bank for you, that can happen. So when we saw the property, we saw a huge opportunity out here. We saw a community that could really use some revitalization. We saw opportunities outside of the cabins, such as boat rentals and a country store up the road, and we can come back to that later because we own that now too. But we took it on originally as my wife's business, and I said, "Hey, I'll do all of all of the construction and all of the remodeling and all of those things if you'll handle the business aspect of it. And so that's what happened. And we created our own website. We did a lot of research on Airbnbs and how that worked. We used to travel a lot. We stayed in Airbnbs, Michael, probably 8 out of the 10 times we were traveling because we like to support those small business owners that either had 1 or 2 or 10 of those things and just trying to make a living. So the way it operates is you actually can just Google the cabins, any cabins in our area, and we pop up because my wife did a good job with the SEO ratings on the internet and that kind of thing. And you can reserve the cabin online. You don't even have to talk to us. You don't even have to see us. You can show up. We have a turnkey system where you stay. There's a check-in, check-out process. You can pay online. And come out to this beautiful sanctuary next to a lake and have a remarkable time. I think during COVID, it really opened the eyes of a lot of people that wanted to get out of the cities, couldn't go out of the state, in regards to being exposed to nature. And when you get out into nature, there's no way that you cannot experience, God's love and all the beautiful things that are created. So we're not done yet. We're still moving forward, but that's how the cabin business works.
How long ago did you venture into this business?
It was February 2018, and I remember that because we came out on Super Bowl Sunday, and it was so cold there was ice on the gravel driveways, and I slid down one of them and fell down as we toured the property.
You said, what day did you say it was?
It was back in February of 2018. So we've had them. We're going into our 6th season right now. I say season because we're heavy seasonal. Most of our rentals happen between spring and the end of fall when the leaves change.
So that means that so early 18, that means in late 17, you had no idea that you'd be in this business. Is that right?
Absolutely zero. Was not even really looking for any kind of opportunity like this.
And that's what's important. That's a takeaway that I would have for people in jail and prison. You may be sitting in one situation right now, but you don't know what's coming in your future. That's what we just learned from Bruce. He had in late 17, he had no idea he'd be getting into this kind of a business, but now you could see how passionate he is about it. What we're going to learn now is how did earlier preparations in his career put him in a position that he could seize an opportunity. And to the extent that Bruce is willing, I'm going to ask some really detailed questions through this interview that will help us understand how we may be able to launch an Airbnb type business, even if we don't have any money, even if we don't have any experience, even if we never thought that would be a pathway for us. One thing I am certain is that if you develop verbal communication skills, writing skills, math skills, and critical thinking, you can spot opportunities just like Bruce did. But Bruce, why don't we go back to the beginning? Tell us about where you grew up and what your thoughts were as a young man, how you were going to earn a living growing up.
It's interesting because where I grew up, we were extremely poor. My mother had 4 children. She raised us by herself. We lived in the inner city in some pretty bad situations. And it's interesting you bring that up because my mindset at that time was like the mindset of a lot of people in the inner city and the people that are surrounding them, which is money is bad, rich people are bad, and there's not an opportunity for you because you don't have money. So oftentimes we get into that negative self-thinking process of this is where I come from and this is all I'm going to be. And I think that changed for me when I asked myself the question one time. I saw a guy loading up his boat to go fishing, and I asked myself this question, like, where's fishing? where is the country? Where are those kind of things? I'm in the inner city. What does that really mean? And that led to some really good mentorship with that guy who used to actually build these little wishing wells in his front yard and refurb bicycles and things like that. He showed me how you could take something very small, something little, something unconditioned, and do a little bit to it and then flip it for a profit. Something as simple as a bicycle or a wishing well. And so once I realized that you didn't have to have money to make money, because that's what a lot of people say. It makes it easier, of course, but a lot of people say, oh, you got to have money to make money. You don't. You've just got to have the right attitude to see something, to see an opportunity, and then tell yourself that every business that was ever started was started by somebody. Every business, right? And who knows where they came from or what was going on with them, but they took the chance. And then the other thing about that quickly is that when you look at a business that you may be interested in, even though you don't have an opportunity yet, I know that the majority of people who are successful in those businesses will talk to you because they love to talk about their businesses. They love to talk about their success. And if you just take a chance to reach out to somebody and open up some dialogue with them, you may be surprised how much you learn, how fast you learn. And of course, that mentorship is priceless. I've always surrounded myself my entire life with somebody who was older than me, who knew way more than me, and would give me an opportunity just to have a conversation with.
And that's what people should see in this interview right here. We never ask anybody to do anything we're not doing. I'm a guy who did 26 years in prison, and I reach out to successful people like Bruce. I say, hey, there's a lot of people in prison that would love to learn about your business. Would you volunteer and spend some time with us? He didn't only volunteer to spend time talking about it, but also helping us write a lesson plan that we hope you are going to work through. But you said you grew up in the inner city. Did you have any focus on education, on formal education while you were growing up? And if you did, where did that take you?
No, I really didn't. Interestingly enough, my mother and all of my siblings gave up on high school early into their high school years. And somehow, by the grace of God, I graduated from high school. And then when I graduated from high school, I looked around and said, look, I want to do something different. I'll never forget where I come from, but there's opportunities out there. So what I did was, Michael, I decided to enlist in the Navy. I didn't want to enlist in the Navy to enlist in the Navy. I mean, I was patriotic. I wanted to sign up and be a part of that cycle our country has in order to make it so great. But I really went in with the intentions of serving so that I could go to college. I knew that my GPA wasn't high enough, and I knew that there were no chances of college being paid for without me having some skin in the game. So I enlisted in the Navy, and I enlisted on a plan that didn't require you to stay in a very long time, but you could qualify for the GI Bill. So I did that. And when I did that, it was so neat. I got up to Chicago, I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, and they immediately sent me out to California. This inner city kid from the Midwest, moves all the way out to California. And when you move out to California where you live, it's a culture shock, but it's a beautiful culture shock. And you can see that there's opportunity out there. And so as soon as I got to California, though, I spent a lot of time at sea. We visited, I want to say, 9 countries in less than 6 months. And this inner city kid, thinking that it was tough where I lived, was exposed to conditions that people were living in that no one should live in. And so I knew that we had great opportunity in this country. And when we came back and I got out of the service, I returned to the Midwest and I pushed through to go to college. When I found out that college would not have anything to do with me, it was suggested to me by someone else that why don't you go to this junior college, get your grades, prove yourself, and transfer back. And that's exactly what I did. And so I went to this very little junior college for a few years. I earned 2 associate's degrees from there, and then I transferred back to the larger school I wanted to go to. Right before completion of that school, I had been working full time to pay for school. I was also a member of a fraternity that we had started at the junior college and moved up to the larger college and had 2 chapters there. These guys were great, still friends of mine to this day. I have the closest friends and relationships from that. Also successful people. But anyhow, I was working and when the opportunity arose with the company I was working for to get into leadership, I grabbed a hold of it and I ran and I climbed the corporate ladder with that company for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And I made a tremendous amount of money at 26 years old by making that good living, even though I was working hard and all of that. It exposed me to the opportunity to buy my first home, to buy my first new car. Of course, I did all that the wrong way by borrowing money instead of saving it, but we could talk about that some other time. But I saw the better things in life, and I had the good mentors in my life because I wasn't afraid to ask the people that were around me in these corporations to mentor me. I think that's key. I think a lot of times we feel as though maybe we come from nothing or we've made such a huge mistake that no one's going to give us an opportunity. But I will tell you this: when you ask somebody to mentor you, um, it's interesting. It's almost like they're so appreciative that you ask them to learn their story. And once they get to know you and realize that, yeah, maybe you made a mistake in your life, or maybe you had a business that wasn't successful, you'd be surprised at how they like to pour into you and actually will help support you and help make you successful.
So I'll tell it as I sit here and listen to you. I think to those days when I was beginning my prison sentence, and I'd listen to somebody like you, and I would just really be in in awe of the way that somebody could communicate. You've got a really strong skill in verbal communications and in telling your story and helping us understand who you are and how you got here. Just in these few minutes of speaking with you, I knew you grew up in the inner city. I knew that you joined the Navy. I learned that you made a commitment to self and personal development by enrolling in school. I learned that you became friends in a fraternity, which developed your social skills. And I have no doubt that those skills you developed all contributed to what the result that you realized, which was, as you described it, making a tremendous amount of money at only 26 years old. Everybody wants to make a lot of money when they're 26 years old. But as Bobby Knight says, everybody has the will to win. Not everybody has the will to prepare to win. And that's what I am hearing in your story is the will to prepare. How did those preparations that you made as a young man really contribute to the career you built in the corporate ladder? Why don't you help? I mean, as I listen to you, I see you're a very fluid communicator. I know that when I was in prison at the start of my journey, that's what I aspired to become. Somebody who could just communicate effortlessly and persuasively and inspire other people. And I hope that's what our audience is learning from you. But tell us about the sector or the industry you went into after college and how long you were in that space.
So you said something key there, though, and I think that one of my mentors told me one time. He said, 90% of what you're going to do is just showing up, and you have to take the first step. I think a lot of times we're afraid to speak in public. I learned one time that people said more people were afraid of speaking in public than they were of death, right? Well, it's that same concept that allows you, once you learn to take that first step, whatever it is, that's that concept to where once you take the first step, you'll take the next, right? When I climbed that corporate ladder, without saying the name of the company, I was also fortunate to get a lot of training, a lot of sales training. They really, really valued that. It was a high pressure deal, but at the same time, I got to see people like John Madden, Lou Holt speak. By the way, I met Bobby Knight not too long ago, which was interesting. So as I climbed that corporate ladder, I also had my first child. And what I realized was there was a balance between money and time at home. And so that sector was sales primarily, but it was also, I had 55 employees underneath me at the time, multiple locations that I supervised, millions of dollars of inventory, trucks, things like that. But I had my first child, Michael. And once I had my first child, I realized I was going to miss out on a lot of things if I stuck around and did that. So what I decided to do was take a leap of faith and go out and do what I was doing, but do it on my own. And I did that for several years. Subsequently, I ended up with a partner who got a divorce and some bad things happened. So the business ended up being dissolved. But at that time, it was really interesting because that leap of faith of leaving a secure income, what I thought to be secure at the time, having a mortgage, having a car payment and all the things, and having a child to feed and all of that, uh, by making that jump and taking that leap of faith, after that happened with my ex-partner, it allowed me to have the confidence to say, you know what, I can get into real estate. And so I jumped into real estate with a couple of my fraternity brothers that I'd met years before that. And we were buying and flipping and doing all the things you could do. We were doing a lot of it with private money. We had investors that would love to get into real estate, but they just wanted to put the money up. They didn't want to do the work. So we worked out creative deals with them. And then along came 2008 and 2009, which a lot of us saw a lot of pain because the subprime market pretty much crushed that industry. However, it was another lesson learned where we made pretty good money for a long time, but now we're going to have to revamp. And it was at that time I got into the financial industry. And I want to stop there and say something quickly because you talked about the skills. I have always said this, and I started a nonprofit, excuse me, when I made this last transition that I'm getting ready to go into. It was all about community outreach for financial education. And I had learned one day standing in line at the subway that a person did not know how to count back change. And it was very discouraging. And so we started that effort. But as you said, those skills, all the skills that you need to hone in on, I would say the most important skill you can hone in on is math. Because if you can learn math, you can learn profit. If you can learn profit, you can avoid disastrous businesses. because if you understand the math and the risk that goes with it, you can figure out how to make money, right? So, not to discourage anybody from doing all the things you said, because like when we met and had dinner, me, you, and my wife, I learned so much from you. I think what you're doing is remarkable. I don't want to discredit that, but I think there's a lack of understanding of math in this world today. And I think that someone who could become proficient in that would be a lot more successful in the long run. So, anyhow, I transitioned into the financial world after that. And once I transitioned into the financial world, I was fortunate enough to continue doing the training that I was doing, finding the mentors in the financial world that were making money and learning some of the concepts that they were employing to make that money, which opened up a lot of doors. I actually this inner city guy sitting at tables with guys that were worth 30, 40, 50 million dollars, and they were interested in talking to us because we brought something to the table they weren't aware of. And that's very interesting, because if you would have went back to the question where you asked me when I was young what I thought about it, I would have never thought that was possible.
And that's something that's really important for anybody going through our courses, is to really listen and learn from somebody who's really been a self-directed person, who's built himself up without the privileges that many people take for granted. He provides evidence that if you can visualize it and you can work toward it, you can achieve a lot. I also heard some other key takeaways besides math. He used the word creative financing. We found investors who had money but didn't have time, and they had to build a story to persuade those investors to provide capital. And that's something that people in jail and prison should recognize. Although they may not have credit, they may be able to develop a story that will persuade other people to believe in them. Those who've gone through our courses know that's how I got started in the real estate business while I was still in the halfway house during my first week of imprisonment. But had I not done the same thing that Bruce is telling us to do, invest in yourself, develop skills in math, develop skills in writing, develop skills in communications, you're just not in a position to seize the opportunity when the opportunity presents itself. But if you do, you could find yourself sitting around the table with people who have super strong financial statements that may want to invest in you because they believe that you have the power to create something of value for them. As Zig Ziglar said, if you can help other people get what they want, you can get everything you want. And Bruce, I'd love to hear about the business that you built. Could you tell us about, to the extent you're willing, even just the industry that it was in and how long you were in that space after you built, I don't know if it was the financial literacy business, you'd mentioned the corporate sector, but tell us about one of the businesses that you built before we get into this resilience and recalibration that brought you into the hospitality business.
Sure. So what happened was I was fortunate to be around a lot of wealthy people, Michael. And what I saw with the wealthy people was that they had a lot of people selling them things. They had attorneys for business, attorneys for personal, accountants for business, accountants for personal, life insurance guys, financial guys. I mean, just all the aspects. Having a ton of money means you have to manage it. And a lot of times manage that money is a huge hassle. And the biggest part of that is those people didn't talk together. All those different professionals, they didn't speak the same language. And so we put together a process with the gentleman I was working with out of Colorado that allowed us to connect the dots for all of those people and make sure that those plans were working together appropriately, so that if a person died, all of their assets didn't end up in the government's hands. And so when I learned so much about that was about 4.5, 5 years of doing that. I also had a passion for this financial literacy. And I thought to myself one day, all of these concepts can be worked with people who have very little money, who could want to gain wealth, who have small businesses. The small business sector makes up, I don't know what it is, 300, I think there's 300,000 small businesses in this country, something like that. It could be off, but it makes up a huge proportion of the income and the taxes and everything and the jobs that are created in America. Yet a lot of those small business owners are not privy to the same kind of information that the wealthy people are getting. And so we figured out how to take a lot of that information, dumb it down to where it's understandable, and present it within the communities with the different people that were working in the nonprofit. And we did a lot of that work. Obviously, it was teaching, it was not selling. We did a lot of it for free. And then the people that were engaged and wanted to learn more would approach us. And when they approached us, we ended up with a lot of clients. But if we didn't, we still gave out a lot of great information to help those small business owners. So I saw basically a disconnect between the wealthy and the people who were trying to become wealthy, and some that just wanted to have a good life, a good business, something they could sell later and mitigate taxes and things like that. And so I was in that total space for about 13 years. And then, quite frankly, toward the end of that, I was really exhausted with it and wanted to do something different. I have a passion for helping people, but there comes a point, I think, in everything that if you're getting burnt out on it, you need to look for something else to do. And there's always other opportunities. So we found this place on accident. My other business, unfortunately, toward the end of it, was not successful, and I was looking for another opportunity. And as God would have it, one door was shutting. I didn't really even know it yet, and another door had opened. The business that we got into here is phenomenal. It's a happy business. It's people who are on vacation, right? People who've saved money to go on vacation, and they just want to have a good time. There's no long-term commitments for rentals. They're short-term rentals, which makes me happy because I didn't want to deal with tenants. But my wife and I looked at each other, and she said, I can do this. I can turn these into Airbnb style homes. We can manage it ourselves. And we decided to move, jump all in. And at that time, I had a house that was paid for, thank God, but not a whole lot of other assets. And of course, we had made to decide to move and start a brand new business from nothing. I think I told you this. We had $12.
No, let's actually get to that. Let's that's a great story. So you said that the business, you've been running a business that had a bit of a reversal of fortune for whatever reason. And how low did it get? How I know that it takes a long time for like things to unfold, but when you kind of hit bottom, help us understand where you were.
Well, I really thought that as I exited that business that I had built up a significant amount of residuals and some things that would sustain us for a little bit. However, it turns out that there are systemic risks and things that happen in business that you just have no control of. And so financially, at the end of it, it just really halted. The income flow stopped, and we had to recalibrate and say, okay, let's assume all of that is gone. How can we build a new business here? What can we do to make this successful? It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. We're going to have to put everything into it. And we made that commitment to each other to hold each other up, to encourage each other, and hit it head on. And that's what we did. And I think sometimes when your back is against the wall, Michael, I think that's the best time to take action. When you're down and out and you're hurting and you're like, man, I got little to no money here. I've got kids that I'm going to relocate. How are we going to do this? I think what it does naturally is it forces you to take the action that you wouldn't normally take if you're comfortable, right? To get out there and pound the pavement. And I mean, I was going around to places when I stopped to get gas. I was telling people that we had cabins by the lake. It's little things
But
like that.
slow it down. So you lost everything, and then
Right.
you went looking for something. Did you have any capital to invest when you decided to take a flyer out and go out? And you saw it in a newspaper, is that right? The ad?
Well, we actually saw it online being advertised. We thought it was one cabin with 10 bedrooms. Kind of laughed it off until we realized it was a little hobby. This guy had a cabin, and he started buying up the land around him, and he kind of got overwhelmed with the real estate portion of it, needed to get out of it, but he owned it free and clear. So we saw the opportunity, and so we approached him and said, hey, let's talk about this. Let's see the property. Let's see what we can do.
Let me, if I could just make it a little smaller for me to understand. You saw
Okay.
an ad online, and the ad
Correct.
online indicated, led
That,
you to believe it was one cabin with 10 bedrooms. Is that right?
that's correct.
And when you saw that ad, one cabin with 10 bedrooms, you looked at it as an opportunity, but did you have capital to even pull the trigger at that stage?
No, there was zero capital. It was just once I saw that it was these cabins that were separated, and it was clear that he was trying to create some sort of little vacation spot. That's when the bells went off, and that's where the previous experience that I had in real estate kicked in and said, okay, wait a minute. Let's see what the situation is. Let's just extend the guy an olive branch and talk to him. And so that's what we did. We extended that olive branch. We met, we saw the property. We had no money. And, this other business was headed south, and we were looking for another opportunity. But once we saw the opportunity and actually showed up and seen what was going on and had a conversation with them, we realized quickly that, hey, maybe we could develop a little rapport with him, show him how interested we are, teach him who we are, let him know about who we are, right? and see if it's a risk that he'd be willing to take by turning it over to us and let us make payments directly to him instead of a bank. And
So
he did. And he did.
unfold that. Let me unpack that for people in jail and prison. Is what I'm seeing here, what I would have been hearing if I were in prison, is there, even though I may not have credit, even though I may not have money, even though I may not have experience in a specific area, if I can sell myself, if I can build a case, I may persuade somebody else to kind of partner with me. And I always have to be looking to find those opportunities. Just like I'm doing right now. I am reaching out to a successful guy and saying, would you take some time and devote 20, 30 hours to do a video, but then also create a course so I could teach others? That's what you've got to be thinking. But what's the skill set that's necessary? You've got to know how to put words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs, create a business model. And you have to see it, right? That what one guy wanted to exit a business, this guy wanted to enter a business, and when they communicated effectively together, they found a solution. When you say an opportunity to have 10, you went out there and you thinking it was a 10-bedroom cabin, you knew that this was, I imagine you knew that this was, even though you didn't have any money, it was going to require you to sign some type of an agreement for it to be successful, that it would involve what some might construe as a substantial amount of money. What did the owner want to exit with? What did he want for his, in order to give you control of the asset?
So originally, when we discovered it, we came out and visited. We discovered there were 5 cabins. We had a little conversation about money at the time. He was wanting to sell them. I believe it was for like 380,000 at the time.
380,000 for the entire project, for all 5 cabins, or a piece?
All 5 cabins, all the land, and some of the equipment, outbuildings, all that kind of stuff that was already in place. And so during that conversation of him telling me the price, he also told me that it was paid for. Now that's key for anybody wanting to get into real estate, because having it paid for, and he had a passion for it, he wanted it to succeed. He just couldn't make it happen himself. So my thought was, well, he needs to find somebody who has that same passion that's going to make it more successful than it is now.
How old was he?
I want to say he was about 55 at the time, roughly, working full time, had another business, wanted to go down to Florida and move and live with his dad. So his life was changing. He had just gotten divorced, and he was just looking for something else to do. But I will say, and this is important to know, I don't think at the time that I talked to him in the very beginning that he wanted to sell it on any kind of contract. He wanted to simply get out of it. So, my wife and I went home though, and you talked about a business model. We went home that night and we sat down and we said, okay, if we can bring these cabins up and we can rent them, how often can we rent them? How much can we rent them for? This way we could really, when we made an offer to him, we could really present him with a payment that would allow us to keep the business intact, not without even providing a true income to us. We really wanted to put it all back into it and pay it off as quick as possible. But we had to do our due diligence and look at other businesses and see how they were operating and how their business model worked to learn. And you could do a lot of that research without even knowing anything about, that business. And then we went back to him once we had our numbers, how much is it going to cost to maintain them, clean them, utilities, property taxes, all the different things that come into owning come into play when you own a piece of real estate. And then what can we effectively tell him? We will make this payment to you every single month on this date with this amount, and know that we can do it. And in the beginning it was real tough, but we made that happen. And so we made that offer to him, and we had to kind of go back and forth on a couple different things and just negotiate. But he was gracious enough to give us the opportunity. And sitting here 5 years later, I'm so glad that we took that chance. I'm so glad that we were able to come out here because, and I'm sure you'll ask me about this, but there has been the ripple effect in this community, and it's offered itself to other businesses that we now own.
So I will get to that, but I would like to help people understand the takeaway that I just got from you. And it's something that Bruce spoke about earlier. Invest some time in understanding math. If you don't understand math, you don't even know what looks like an opportunity. What I hear is, in Bruce's situation, there's a guy that's middle age. I'll say middle age because I'm 59. And although I like to say I'm middle age, there's not a lot of 120-year-olds walking around. but I will say that there are people that want to change their life. What worked for them at one stage might not work for them anymore. He might want to get home. There might not be a great exit strategy for $380,000 properties in 2018. And Bruce came up with a plan, and it made sense to the guy, but he had to break down the math. So I'm going to try and break down that math with you just to show why it's so important. When you said it was $380,000, was that for a total of 5 cabins plus land and plus you said some equipment? Is that right?
Correct.
So we could just take a simple calculator and just take 380,000 divided by 5, and that equals roughly $76,000 a cabin. Is that right? Roughly.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, and that includes a lot. But if I just want to break it down in those terms, $76,000 a cabin, I could kind of try and reverse engineer the math on that. Well, how much money does every cabin have to generate every month in order for me to justify this payment and sell this guy on, hey, I can make this work for you that way? What was the number you were looking to see as a minimum that you would need each cabin to produce monthly to have this business make sense for you?
Well, so it's interesting because I can't give you the exact numbers because my wife is so much brighter than I am, that she put all this stuff together. But what we needed to see was not only that you could make the payment, right? So you have to rent it so many times, you have to pay for the cleaning, you have to the maintenance and taxes, whatever. But you also need to give yourself a cushion, because if there's a situation where you can't rent it, something happens. Let's say a tornado comes through and the power's down for 3 weeks, right? Whatever. You need to have that cushion there. So we built that model not just based on the known, but also the unknown. And then, of course, the amount of time, how much time are you going to take to actually pay those off? We were fortunate because he built in a 2% interest rate. That's how motivated he was to do this deal with us. Well, 2% on that is next to nothing. Not to mention, we also had an exit strategy. We believe that the cabins were worth probably about $475 when we bought them, even though we got them for $380. And then we figured, hell, if we just keep building them, making them nicer, renting them out, building the business, because as you rent them out, you're building a business. So our LLC value increased. And so our exit strategy also included the fact that we could sell them in the future, right? So worst case scenario, you sell them and you can pay off the difference. So I know when you're calculating it the way you are and just kind of backing it off, I think the next step would take the average cabin that you have to pay off, right, at $76,000, divided amongst the months. Let's say it's 60 months. Okay?
Is that what you negotiate with him? I want you to finance for me on 5 years.
Our original offer was to take it out 10, and then we came back in at 5. I don't want to get overly complicated for somebody that doesn't understand balloon notes, payoffs at the end, refinancing, things like that. But the original structure, or the original offer that we made, included the interest, but we took it out over 10 years and said, okay, if we break it down over 120 months, and as you said, the average cabin was 76. If you take 76,000 divided by 120 months, just without interest, right, you'll see that is a very low number relative to renting that cabin, because our average rental is like $150 a night. So you can see really quickly how you could turn that into a profitable business, as long as you're smart enough to build a cushion as well in case something happens that's unforeseen.
Well, you could even do it easier. If you take 380,000 and divide it by 10 years, that's only $38,000 a year plus the interest. So you're looking at, well, all the cabins, if they can generate $5,000 a month, right? That kind of pencils. But you do the math on it at $100. What did you say it was per night?
The average is $150 a night, and you just hit the nail on the head, because the payment ended up being about $3,000 a month.
So $3,000 a month is what you have to do. You can then kind of reverse engineer, can I get there? And if I do increase the value of the asset, not only am I paying off the note, but I'm increasing the value of the asset. So debt's going down, value is going up, and that spread is really where wealth is created. And that's what I've just learned from Bruce. So it's super important for you to try and see these parameters, and it just makes a really compelling case for every individual to invest in himself so that he can make himself a viable candidate to solve other people's problems. And that's effectively what you did for this fella, is you solved the problem for him while creating an opportunity for yourself. Tell us, you started in 2018, you said. Where are you now? How many cabins do you have? And walk us through your current business, what it looks like.
So currently we still have a very small payoff, and I believe we'll be paid off this summer, believe it or not. So you're talking about 5 years versus the original 10 that we thought. And the reason for that is we took a lot of that extra income that we were making and we actually paid it down as fast as possible, because we knew that if something bad happened, we could always sell it and take the sales price minus the payoff and keep the difference. And also, while I'm on that, Michael, one thing to understand when people are taking a risk in real estate is they need to know that they can get their money back, right? So if I sell something to you for 380, I need to be comfortable with knowing that if you don't pay me, I can always get it back and sell it. And so the more you pay it down, the happier they are. Where we're at today, though, is fantastic because we're about to pay it off. We've got room for expansion, but because we've been in this community, we've been offered properties around the cabins that weren't even for sale. And we just don't want to jump on those opportunities until there's no more debt owed on the existing cabin business. But it is generating a tremendous amount of revenue, which is really good because obviously we have to live. But we've expanded. And one of the things we expanded into was boat rentals. And we ended up working in the local state park over here, running the camp store and the concessions. And we jumped on this little boat rental business at this marina and did somewhat of a different deal. And it just happens that the guy that was doing that owned this little grocery store, deli, bait shop up the road. So we ended up buying that from him, same kind of contractual deal, moved our boat rentals over there. Well, that thing's already paid off. It paid itself off really quick. And so the ancillary opportunities were provided by us getting into the community. And we do a lot of nonprofit work in the community, and we work really close with a food pantry here. We've actually just raised enough money to buy them their own building, which is cool. But starting from a little simple cabin business and a guy giving us an opportunity that we're extremely grateful for, and I'm so glad he did that. I have so much respect for him by taking that chance, has put us into a community to where we have grown. And so even though we had to really work hard for the first almost 4 years, and when I say hard, to build them out, to make them better, to get higher revenue each night that we rented them, we've now created enough value to where we've added to that existing business with the boat rentals and the other store that we're building net worth again. And, I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but it's a really good feeling coming from that dark spot of having nothing to knowing that, if the world collapses tomorrow, we have something that actually has value because it's all paid for, right? So, or soon to be paid for.
So you said you started with 5 cabins. Is that still what you have on there, is 5 cabins?
Well, we still have 5 cabins. It was discovered that one of the cabins was over the property line, so we're trying to remedy that right now. But we still do have 5 cabins.
And what is the occupancy rate?
Well, if I'm conservative on that, between Memorial Day and Labor Day, I would say 85%. I mean, it's pretty strong in the summertime. We do have 3 that we leave open in the wintertime too, and it's kind of hit or miss, but it's very, very desirable. And I think part of that has to do with my wife's ability to really work hard on the internet and understand how reservations and SEO ratings and that kind of thing works. And Michael, just to elaborate to that, the very first year, just so you know, by the 3rd year, we had doubled the amount. And the reason for that was because we were here working at meeting people and building a new business.
So there's so many takeaways in there, for somebody who's in jail or a prison. They might say, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me because I can't go out and negotiate a transaction like this right now. But what you can hear, I think, are the principles of our course are really outlined in what Bruce just described, including what he just said about his wife using the internet and SEO And there are people in prison that might say, what's SEO? Well, you wouldn't know that if you're not spending your time reading, if you're not staying current in what's going on in the world. But to the extent an individual invests his time inside to develop writing skills, to develop reading skills, to develop a vocabulary, to develop critical thinking, that person is almost building a personal net worth. And then, just like Bruce shared with us in his story, you can leverage those personal skills to create new business opportunities. And I got really also inspired by what he'd said. Once he built value in the real estate business, a completely separate opportunity dropped into his lap, and that's the boat rental business. I imagine, do you own the boats as well, Bruce? Did you have to go out and find a way to acquire boats?
Well, so the gentleman came to came to us and saw what a great job we were doing with the cabin business, and had the relationships inside the park, and said, "Hey, I'm exhausted with doing this. It looks like a great compliment to your business. Would you be interested in taking this over?" And I looked at my wife and I was like, ding, ding, ding. Yes, absolutely. But what's the liability? So then again, math came into play. You're going to buy these boats for X amount of dollars. How much does it take to operate the boats, right? What are your expenses? How many times do you have to rent these boats so that they can pay for themselves? And so we went through that process and realized that that is a great business to be in. And that actually, it was so interesting. I think our second year of running boats, we did more in 3 months of boat rentals than we did running our cabin business for a whole year. Um, and so that, it was an opportunity again where a guy was exhausted, saw that we were living up to our expectations, or the previous owners of our cabin business expectations. And so he knew that that was a good risk. And that all comes back to that initial first step of just having the confidence to reach out to somebody. You said something else that's key there, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you said, you're talking about the critical thinking and the writing skills and all of the other things that people should be doing to prepare. If you can't sell yourself, you could be the smartest person in the world with 16 different degrees on the wall behind you. If you cannot talk to people and relate to people in an authentic way and be able to sell yourself and be honest with them, then they're never going to take the chance on you to begin with. So if it were me, I would be working on myself first, making myself better, making myself authentic. And, Michael, I know that you spent all that time in prison. We've talked about it to no end, and I've heard so many webinars and everything that you're doing. You sell yourself. You do a really great job of selling yourself because you're authentic. Hey, my name is Michael Santos, and I did 26 years in prison. There's no more, there's no more greater authenticity of an individual than somebody who can stand up and say that. And I think what I've found also is that when you do that, people respect you because everybody's going through something in their life. You just don't know about it. And by you being authentic about it, it opens the door for a conversation. So back to what I was saying is being able to build those skills for yourself to be able to not be afraid to talk to people is the first step to opening any door for any business or any kind of success.
And that's what resilience and rebuilding is all about. And what I'd like to do is, because we're coming to the end of our time together with our audience, I'm going to recap what I heard from Bruce in our 10-part module, and then I'll ask Bruce to define us, what did I miss in all of that? So here's the 10, right? Our course says the first thing you got to do is define success. We heard Bruce doing that repeatedly through his life, from the time growing up in the inner city, and when he's first asking questions about what fishing is like, he's making a decision to really kind of break the mold in his family and be the first person to get an education. How does he get an education? He decides to go into the Navy. While he's in the Navy, he starts seeing things that are different that he's never seen before. He then sets, that's the second module, goals. His goals initially, get an education. Start with a 2-year degree, transition into a 4-year degree, leverage that to become successful as he defines success, acquiring assets, building a life. That leads to the third module in the course. You got to have the right attitude. No success comes unless a person makes 100% commitment to success as the individual defines success. We saw him do that as a young man, as a young military man, as a young student in his corporate career, and we saw it again when he decided to start, I think he said with $12 and tap into all of his personal skills and persuade others to partner with him. That's the fourth module. You've got to aspire to something else. He aspired throughout his life to always be climbing and building a better pathway, just like participants in our course can do if they truly want to prepare for success. 5, you got to take action. Bruce isn't a person that sits around waiting for opportunities to jump off the page. He gets his partner, starting with his wife. They go out and they find something. They take action and listening to what the other person wants. They go out and write a business plan, which they couldn't have done if they didn't understand math. And they come and build a proposal that the guy buys into. And they negotiate and they come up with a transaction. 6, he's got to hold himself accountable. He doesn't only have to hold himself accountable to eat and to grow, but he's got to hold himself accountable to this guy who believed in him and said, I will accept these terms. You have to hold yourself accountable as well. This is just a fact that we can learn from all successful people. 7, you got to be aware. You got to keep your head in the game. And we saw that in Bruce when he decided to reinvent and recalibrate and become resilient. They looked online for the right opportunity. And the right opportunity presents itself to the people who are prepared to seize opportunities. And when that happens, people become aware of them, just like that landowner became aware of them. And later, just as that boat owner became aware of him. And now Bruce is no longer this person that's just starting. He's the go-to guy for people in that community that others want to come and sell and partner with him because he's successful. And that only happens, module 8, by being authentic. You can't fake it. You got to be for real. And being for real means that you've got to have a plan, put priorities in place, build your tools, tactics, and resources, and execute that plan every day. That's what I heard in Bruce. That's why that's a component of this course. Number 9, you got to celebrate those little achievements because it's the little achievements that lead to bigger opportunities. Had he not spent some time looking online, they never would have found that opportunity. Had he not took the time to build out a business plan, he may not have been able to persuade that guy to sell him. Had he not persuaded that guy to sell him, he may not have been able to build the wealth that he has built in just 5 years, from 2018 to 2023. And that's number 9, module 9. You got to celebrate every little achievement because they all add up to bigger opportunities. And finally, 10, you got to live in gratitude and be grateful for the blessings that come our way. I am incredibly grateful to Bruce for taking the time to not only share his inspiring story with us, but also work on writing the lesson plan. That's somebody who genuinely doesn't talk about wanting to just start a nonprofit. He's also volunteering his time. And we are super grateful to you, Bruce, for taking this time today. Could you tell me what I kind of missed in that little recap of your story?
Michael, I don't think you missed anything, and I'm quite humbled of what you're saying about me because honestly, it's not just me. It's my wife, and she's a great partner, and she complements the things that I lack on for sure, and we work well together. But the little successes, the celebrating the little successes, you can't do that too much. You make $10 profit. Go get some ice cream together. You know what I mean? Those little successes are important because when you first start out and you realize that you're coming from nothing, and you a lot of times we'll just stick our head in the sand, right? We want to be successful, but we don't want to do anything about it. It's very, very hard. I think equating your attitude and your drive to your checkbook is a mistake. God created us in the image of himself, and we're all made for success. It's just whether or not you believe it. And so I'm happy to work with you. I look forward to working with you in the future. I think there's a lot of good things we can do together. I'm your math guy. Hope to be more wealthy in the future. But I think sometimes, who was it that said it? Was it Les Brown said he lost 7 businesses before one was successful? I don't know. Anyway, it happens. You can't lay there and you can't live in the past. You cannot live in the past. It's so tough. I think that's probably the only thing you missed. If you continue to live in the past, you miss today and you'll never have a future. I believe that wholeheartedly. My grandfather died last year at 99. He lived a great life, and he used to tell me that all the time.
Well, we'll never ask anybody to do anything that we're not doing. You can see I'm reaching out to successful people like Bruce so that we can bring that story into jails and prisons across America. So I want to thank you for being a part of our community. And Bruce, you are now a prison professor.
Thank you, sir.